So, Dog Eat Dog. This is one of the many films I saw at the London Film Festival.
Mm-hmm. Can we trust you to have remembered it?
Yeah, it was about like a dog or something, wasn't it? I remember it as if it was yesterday. It is directed by Paul Schrader, who is the writer-director of films like American Gigolo and Light Sleeper, though he's probably best known as the screenwriter of Taxi Driver and Raging Bull and The Last Temptation of Christ. Works with Scorsese a lot and often makes films about damaged masculinity and people imprisoned in a sort of internal hell of their own making.
Yeah.
Very sort of angsty director. And it's directed from a script by Matthew Wilder, based on a book by Eddie Bunker, who was a career criminal turned novelist / actor, probably best known as playing Mr. Blue in Reservoir Dogs. He's the guy who says, "What's good service? Take you in the back, suck your dick."
Yeah.
Great line. Immortal line. So the plot is about three ex-cons. There's Troy, played by Nicolas Cage. He's the sort of debonair leader of the three who, for some reason, thinks he looks like Humphrey Bogart, despite not looking like him at all. There's Diesel, played by Christopher Matthew Cook, who is this huge kind of thug of a guy who's the de facto kind of heavy of the group. And then there's the aptly named Mad Dog, played by Willem Dafoe, who, as his name suggests, is a sort of violent, impulsive madman. The film is about a mob boss hiring them to kidnap the baby son of a guy who owes him money to make the guy pay up. And with this one last job, the three can maybe leave their life of crime. And here's a clip from the beginning of the movie where Troy introduces the gang in voiceover and talks about Willem Dafoe shanking a guy in prison for him and saving his neck.
I can't help it, I'm in love.
There was me, Troy. There was Mad Dog. And there was Diesel. See, people pretty much can't stand Mad Dog, and I get it, I do. But what you gotta understand is, I know this guy in a very particular way. I barely knew Mad Dog, but he knew my parole was coming up, and he took this fall from me. He just did it, like that. And so somebody like that, you owe a lifetime.
So there's an interesting history to this film where Paul Schrader's previous film, The Dying of the Lights, which also starred Nicolas Cage, was taken away from him and heavily recut, prompting him and Cage to disown it completely. And in the press for the film, he's talked about the impetus for it was to make something together to sort of wash away the bad taste of that previous film. And with Dog Eat Dog, it's a sort of low-budget film, but he had full creative control and final cut on it. And this explains the approach of the movie, and I think there's very much a devil-may-care attitude at play here, which has led to an annoying dismissal from some critics, I think. It's got quite a negative critical response, and I think part of it is just this narrative imposed on the film, people just dismissing it as slightly tossed off and like not particularly serious film. And Schrader hasn't helped this by pretty much stating that as well. He said something to the effect of, "I've worked with on a lot of serious pieces of cinema, and this isn't one of them." But you know, serious and bad is not equatable, and I think it's a very enjoyable film, and I really liked it. And just the fact that everyone else hates it just makes me like it more almost. You know, I'm sort of like I'm wondering if I'm just defending this film more than it actually is worthy of it.
Yeah.
You ever have that?
Yeah. Well, you want to, stand up for the underdog.
Yeah, the underdog.
The underdoggy dog.
Eat dog. So, one of the criticisms leveled against it is that it's some sort of sub-Tarantino-esque movie. But I think rather than it being sub-Tarantino, it's just drawing from similar sources. And there's a connection there because it's based on a book by Eddie Bunker, whose writing, along with Elmore Leonard, is sort of an influence on Tarantino to begin with. And Dog Eat Dog came out in the mid-90s where there was a sort of second wave of crime movies, like the 70s.
Wait, do you mean Reservoir Dogs?
No, sorry, the book Dog Eat Dog.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Came out post Reservoir Dogs, but like the whole 90s is like the 70s in terms of crime movies. There's like 70s crime movies, and then like the 80s less so, and then like the 90s is a big, maybe post Tarantino was a lot of crime movies. But the connection is more that both Dog Eat Dog and Tarantino are heavily influenced by French New Wave, particularly Godard. This is going to get some deep film knowledge here.
Nice.
And Tarantino, I think, is dismissed as a sort of lover of exploitation cinema, but his biggest influence is French New Wave. He named his company A Band Apart.
Yeah.
And what his films have and what Dog Eat Dog has and what's borrowed from French New Wave is this very self-aware quality where they're films which know they are films, and they work in genres and sometimes obey the genre logic, sometimes subvert it, and sometimes comment on it. And so, to like briefly explain that, like Pulp Fiction is a classic thing where it's got these crime storylines, like the guy dates the mob's boss's wife, and you think it's going to go one way, and then something super surprising happens.
Yeah.
And that's like a new wave thing. And the same is true of Dog Eat Dog. And what it really is a crime film about crime films. And in the press for the film, Paul Schrader talked about trying to figure out what a crime movie looks like in 2016, post Scorsese, post Tarantino, post Guy Ritchie, post modern we are now, whatever it is. And if you look at it that way, it's basically a film where like every scene it's trying to try and figure out what it is, and like every scene is tackled with a different visual aesthetic and different sort of editing rhythm. And there's this sort of darkly comic nihilism to the film, which just becomes more apparent. And as it goes on, it sort of the film almost gets deconstructed to the point where it sort of drifts away.
Right. Right.
And like nothing means anything, which just makes it really interesting. It's a really interesting watch. And for example, what I mean by this is that at the beginning of the film, like the first scene, there's this moment of extreme violence involving Willem Dafoe in a sort of suburban house, which is like completely pink and cushioned and candy floss like, sort of. And I think it can be dismissed as like sort of sub-Tarantino, like juxtaposing the violence with the opposite. But I think what it's really saying is going one beyond that, and just like those scenes have been done to death to the point where it's like a cartoon. It doesn't mean anything. This isn't real.
Right.
And that's what the film is sort of saying. And this approach not only livens up a sort of quite samey material you've seen before, but actually dovetails nicely with the actual theme of the characters, because they're all these losers. And one of Eddie Bunker's big motifs is that once you're in crime, you're a criminal for life. And he's like the exception to his own rule. So it's like everyone in the movie's a bit downtrodden, a bit weary, and like it's the last job and it's probably not going to go well, but they're doing it anyway, and nothing means anything, and are we ever going to get it? We're just going to, our life is just prison reality, and it's all a bit meaningless. I mean, that sounds like it should be horrible to watch, but it's actually hilarious. It's also got really good performances. Nicolas Cage is always value for money. I really like him, not in an ironic meme sense.
Where
but just
are
as
we
an
on like
actor.
the sort of Cageometer?
Well, he was... Well, Paul Schrader offered him the role of Mad Dog. It's like, obviously.
Obviously.
But Nicolas Cage said he didn't want to do it, so he plays Troy, who's like the smart one of the group. But I think Nicolas Cage is obviously great at playing mental people. He's really entertaining. But he's also really good at playing weary people. I think his voice is just built to be a bit sort of... Oh, God,
Sounds a little bit tired.
Yeah, exactly.
And bored.
And yeah, and it suits his character, and his voiceover, which is like throughout the movie, kind of undercuts the drama a lot in a way which is really amusing. And William Dafoe is brilliant in it. His character could so easily be over the top, and it's like the sort of thing where you imagine it's actually very hard to play that character, because it could just be cartoonish or ridiculous and just like, not at all believable. But he invests it with this sort of childlike insecurity, and it's a bit like his character from Life Aquatic, Klaus. It's like, oh, thanks for not picking me, like really put out when people like, it's like that, but like stabbier.
Right, yeah.
And he's hilarious in it. And the other guy, Matthew Cook's really good. And there's a definite like Freudian reading of the movie where they're all just like the same character at different...
Oh, it's like the id, the
yeah.
soup and everything, yeah.
And
that's also quite a classic crime gang dynamic anyway.
Yeah.
Where there's like the smart one, and then like the slightly dumber one, and then like the incredibly dumb one.
Yeah. It's like Goodfellas or whatever.
Yeah.
And like they sort of... And there's like a sequence in the movie where they all do the same thing, and it's like they all tackle it in different ways, but they all end up at the same point, which kind of reinforces the sort of we're all heading to our own personal hell kind of narrative. But yeah, it's very zippily put together. It's 90 minutes. And I think the reason I liked it so much is because I thought I was getting the film some people have dismissed it as, like a sort of low rent straight to DVD crime movie. But it's a bit more than that. And the interplay between the sort of melancholy and dark humor of the source material and the sort of experimental film essay directing approach was really interesting. And so it's got a limited cinematic release and it's on demand now. I don't know if I didn't like love the movie, but I think it's well worth watching. I'd give it a solid 4 stars.
Cool.
You know,
It sounds good. It sounds like you've outsmarted the idiot critics who don't get it.
I don't know. Watch the first scene and like if you're put off by it, you won't enjoy the movie. But if you can,
Yeah. I remember watching, I was really put off by the first scene of Natural Born Killers. This was a long time ago. I
Yeah.
watched it when I was about 15 or something. And it had that kind of like frenetic, like hyper Tarantino-y MTV video kind of thing. And I was like, oh God, I can't watch this fucking film.
all right.
But
Well, Doggy Dog's
is it a lot like
quite
that?
similar. But I think it's,
yeah, it
it's-
sounds good. It does sound interesting though.
yeah, and the ending is really strong, I think, and weird.
Mm.
It's it's a risky movie. I feel like it takes all these risks. Sometimes out of a sort of intellectual pursuit, sometimes in a sort of why the fuck not sort of way. But that makes it fun. Makes it fun to watch. So watch it or don't. I don't know. It's your own life.
Ooh, time for a break from all the film chat. Have a cup of tea, maybe make a quick snack and telephone a friend so you know where she's at. Right, that's enough now. Back to film chat.